Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Rape culture is a complex set of beliefs that encourage male sexual aggression and supports violence against women. It is a society where violence is seen as sexy and sexuality as violent. In rape culture, women perceive a continuum of threatened violence which ranges from sexual remarks to sexual touching to rape itself. Rape culture condones physical and emotional terrorism against women as the norm. In a rape culture, both men and women assume that sexual violence is a fact of life, that it is inevitable. Recent times has seen the re-emergence of a movement aimed at raising awareness of rape culture. Having read the accounts of many victims or survivors of the manifestation of this rape culture, many persons, men and women alike, took to social media where they expressed shock and disgust in equal measure. Even so, many still ask, what is rape culture? Does it exist in Trinidad and Tobago? How do we address it? How do we make TNT safe again? Good afternoon, I am Dionne Baptiste, and for this installment of Conversations with CNews, we're joined by Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs, Ayanna Webster-Roy. Minister, thank you for agreeing to speak with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Let's start by, do you agree that we have a rape culture here in Trinidad and Tobago?
When you look at the statistics, and specifically with rape, it may not speak to a rape culture. However, it does speak to a culture of violence against women in Trinidad and Tobago. And that for me is quite troubling, especially during the last period where we have been observing the 16 days of activism. And we have seen so many manifestations of violence against women during that period. It calls for more urgent action, not only by us in government, but by every ordinary citizen in Trinidad and Tobago, for us accepting that we have a problem and for us working towards treating with that problem at the community level, at the homes, and even as a wider society, using all the organizations and resources we have available.
Okay, so you're no longer comfortable to use the term rape culture to describe what is happening here in Trinidad and Tobago?
I would rather say we have a culture of violence against women and a culture based on gender-based violence.
Okay, so you said that every one of us as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, we have a part to play in eradicating this growing problem. How do you think the average person could go about helping in this regard?
Well, first of all, it's the conversations. Activism should not last for a period, it should be continuous. So even at the home level, where we need parents to change the mindset of their boys and even the girls, let sons understand that women, girls are not objects to be debased or violated, but we are people, and start helping our young people to understand and respect each other. Even as women, the conversations we have with each other to show support and not to berate and belittle each other as women. In our schools, helping our children in the schools to understand that violence against women and girls, violence in any form is unacceptable. What I've recognized is that we need a change in cultural mindset in Trinidad and Tobago. There are some things that we would have taken for granted for too long, and we now start to recondition our minds and realize that what would have been a norm is not something that is actually harming our society, and we need to address it. So for me, it means continuous conversations, continuous advocacy, and an acceptance of what is the reality. We have a problem, we need to address it. The change begins with me, it begins with you. There's something that I could do better, there's something that you could do better. Maybe you might have made a joke in the past about a young lady, her clothes, maybe changing the way you do that. Maybe you might have looked at a certain movie, seen certain acts of violence depicted, and it would have seemed normal to you. You relay it, change that. You would have seen somebody being bullied on the roadside, a young lady being attacked by a partner, and taken out your phone and videotape it to put it on Facebook. Stop that. What I want to encourage people is that those things that we have been doing and promoting, especially things that harm us as a people, we need to really stop it, stop, reflect, think, how would my action impact on me, on those around me, and on society as a whole.
And what you're describing would require a change in the belief system of the average citizen. How do we go about changing that?
For me, it would start from small, starting with our children, the way we educate our children, the way we socialize our children, the way we converse with our children. So it really needs for us, it really calls for us to go into our homes and our communities. And to do that, rely heavily on the NGO sector, those who work on the ground, those who work in the trenches with the communities, and help them to reshape the way people think, help them to reshape the way we culturize our young men or young women. help us to really bring about a positive change in Trinidad and Tobago. And as I said before, it's something that we all have to make a personal decision to do. I could say, well, okay, from now on, I will do certain things differently. You could choose to do certain things differently, and you could advocate what it is that you want to change. Start the conversations. I know in a lot of communities, people tend to hide things and we don't speak about it. But one of the first steps in healing is being able to talk about an issue and addressing it face on and saying, you know what, this is a problem that we have. In order to address it, we need to accept it. We need to face it head on and talk about it. And then after we talk about it, it's point people in the right direction to get the interventions they would need to improve their life.
One of the issues that seem to keep coming up with regards to the prevalence of gender-based violence in Trinidad and Tobago is our police officers, members in authority, are they trained to deal with cases like this? Well,
funny enough, I had a conversation with someone in the police service and they said that they actually received training. But for me, it's seeing the training manifested in the delivery of service. When we had the parliamentary training, I would have shared my #life in leggings story when I spoke about going to the police about a peeping Tom and not feeling as though I was getting any justice or my story was being taken seriously. And that is not a story unique to me, it's unique to many people across Trinidad and Tobago. So while the training is there, is the implementation of the training, actually putting what you would have learned into practice and it coming out at the service delivery end of it. So what I would suggest is for us to have more continuous training, and also in the continuous training having people the right aptitude to treat with the situation, because not every, in my opinion, not every officer will be able to treat with a gender-based issue the way we want a person to treat with it. So if we have persons specifically trained for that purpose, who understand, who would have the right attitude and aptitude to deal with it, then it will come across as though we actually getting the service that we deserve from the police.
Okay, in an interview with a survivor of rape and violence, gender-based violence, she told me that when she went to report, she was sent to 4 different police stations. Is there any way that things like this could be changed? The policies governing things like this could be amended so that the victims aren't made to feel like they're being victimized all over again?
I know. I would have received that story as well. Somebody actually told me that when they went to one police station, they needed to have a female officer present and the officer wasn't there, so they had to go to another station, and when they went to that station, it wasn't the jurisdiction, and you know, the victim at every step of the journey, she had to relieve the pain and, you know, retell this story. I'm positive that there are policies and procedures in place. It's just a matter of having them fully implemented and adhered to.
Okay. There has been renewed calls for the use of pepper spray and stuff like that to be legalized here in Trinidad and Tobago, taking into consideration the increase in the number of reports we have of gender-based violence. The latest call being made by Pastor Moses in the funeral for Sherna Banfield. What are your thoughts on this? Is it something that you agree with? Is it something that you think government should at least consider?
I'm not too sure about the pepper spray story. One of the things that I'm considering is having extensive training in our communities to have women do self-defense, so we know how to safeguard ourselves when we're going out. But also as women, we have to take personal responsibility for our safety. So I will notice sometimes women walking down the street and they have their headphones in and they're not really aware of the surroundings. Now you're vulnerable, you're not sure who is lurking behind you. So we have to start to be more responsible and aware when we're doing things as ladies. We have to take our safety as our #1 priority. Yes, there are things that we would do as government. Yes, there are certain strategies we try to implement. As I said before, I'm looking at self-defense classes for women and girls. However, we have to start to be more mindful and more alert when we are out there. You go driving through communities sometimes as an MP, and you see young girls just out on the block late at night walking. They don't have any chaperone, they're not in a group, so they open themselves also again to attack, because at the end of the day, most of the crimes are crimes of opportunity. You see a young lady on her own, she looks vulnerable, she looks small in stature, she might be easy to prey on, and the mentality is to go and pray. while we're doing that, we also have to look at addressing our men, helping them to understand that we shouldn't look at women as potential prey, but women as persons we have to nurture and love and protect. After all, we are the ones who give birth to you. We bring you into this world. So why not nurture us, protect us, care for us, instead of looking at us as easy prey? And that is something I said before, would have to come from a change in mindset, really speaking out as women and really having our men join us in that conversation on the way they socialize our boys and the concept of what it is to be a man and to be macho, instead of having macho be aggressive and macho being about having a number of women and macho being, the aggressor. How about telling our young boys that macho could be the soft, nurturing, caring type? Macho could be the person who really knows how to embrace and comfort instead of bring pain. Macho could be about, bringing healing and helping women to achieve their full potential, while you yourself have realized your full potential. So we recognize, first, to address issues of violence against women, we also have to address the issues that would affect the men, and also find the right interventions for those who are perpetrators and those who are leaning towards becoming perpetrators. So we want to encourage parents to look at the children from small. Look for the telltale signs. I read a book one time about a serial killer, and his first crime was actually against a neighborhood cat, where he would have caught the cat, dismembered it, and he would have progressed from there. And in this story, the parents would say that they would have noticed little signs from early, but the father would have said, oh, it's just been a boy. Boys will be boys, girls, sugar and spice and everything nice, and the boys, the other saying. So we want our parents to really be alert. Look for the telltale signs. If you pick up signs of trouble in your children from early, seek the right intervention. We have services available through the schools, through the different government agencies, for counseling, etc., so we could bring about the change that is needed in Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, Minister Roy, thank you so much for coming and chatting with us and for sharing your thoughts on the issue.
Thank you for having me, and I hope the conversations will continue.
I hope so too. Thanks again.
Thanks. Okay, you're welcome.
Welcome back to this installment of Conversations with C News. This time, for this segment, I'm joined by Coordinator of the Socialist Student Conference at the University of the West Indies, Amilcar Sanatan, and Head of the Organization of Abused and Battered Individuals, Sherna Alexander. Lady and gent, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Sanatan, I want to start with you. You would have been privy to the conversation I just had with Minister Ayanna Webster-Roy. So my takeaway from what she said, basically, she is of the opinion that we don't necessarily have a rape culture here, but we have an issue with gender-based violence. Care to respond to what she would have said?
Well, I do think that Minister Roy established a level of commitment in the way that she would see the solution come forward on this issue of violence against women, that she understood that men have a very important responsibility in being part of this conversation, but also that they need to challenge themselves and the ideas of masculinity in order to really absorb this problem and the pain of gender-based violence. However, there is an area for serious caution and concern, which is that rape culture is somehow distinct from gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is violence against women because they are women. Rape culture is pervasive in society, which makes male aggression and dominance look sexy, but also street harassment and all the experiences that she identified are examples of rape culture. So rape culture doesn't have to do with the incidence of rape. It's the creation of an environment of risk for women. And that is, I find, very concerning in terms of anybody, any citizen doing it. Second, that is why the solutions around self-defense training for communities, as she proposed, that she's interested in that approach. That doesn't address the issue of patriarchy, getting women to fight back, right? I understand why there might be an immediate concern with it, and I understand. We need to really rethink what is the role of the state in addressing gender-based violence at a systemic level, and what they can do to introduce into the education system, as well as the social sector, not just social services, the social sector, to really rethink the idea of gender-based violence. But rape culture is real. It shouldn't be seen as distinct from gender-based violence. And rape culture is pervasive, and we need to be categorically clear about that.
Ms. Alexander, care to share your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with Amilcar when he did the division, as I should say, between gender-based violence and rape culture. And it is, as he said, is a pervasive issue within society. Rape culture is the social norms that we have passed from generation to generation, that we have come to accept as something normal that is happening, that you know, as you will call it, from the catcalling, even in the songs, even in print and media, sexual objectification of women and even men, you know. So it's a culture and an ideology that has been passed down. Gender-based violence comes from the actual physical hitting out, if I should use the word hitting out, and manifesting of the behavior that is in the mental processes of the mind. So it's actually manifesting in mental thoughts physically. You know, you can compile that and say, okay, it's the gender-based violence in the area of physical, sexual, emotional, and so forth.
Some persons seem to have an issue, based on some of these posts I would have read on social media, have an issue with the term rape culture, saying instead that what we have is a misogynistic culture here in Trinidad and Tobago. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think there's a difference between the two? If yes, what is it?
Well, in a racist society, you have racial discrimination, right? That is just an unfair unemployment practices. Oh, that's just unfair unemployment practices. It's also racism, structural, because it's tied to Mr. Alexander proposed around an ideology, which is a belief system about gender that exists. Misogyny is just another way to say the hatred of women. Sexism is that divide around masculinity and femininity. Rape culture is a pervasive sexist culture which says that men are entitled to women's bodies for male desire, oftentimes against the interests of women. So what we see with these words and definitions that are floating around, I love it because it's a consciousness and a vocabulary entering into the popular dialogue and conversation. However, there might be a certain type of intervention that must be made by people within the university, state, educators, faith-based organization leaders to bring the definitions, and let's weigh it out and have examples and talk about it. And maybe if our songs and calypsos and soca did it as well, and not the inverse, right, we'd have had a very different dialogue. So the work that Mr. Alexander does at UWI, right? You know what I mean? As much as I stay within the university, the activists always deal with the day-to-day reality. So for them, these definitions are lived, right, by what they see. And it's very difficult in the face when they say something doesn't exist. And on day-to-day experience, people have to push back against the threat of it.
Ms. Alexander, based on a lot of the information that's being shared across social media, some which was sent to me personally, a general theme seems to be that a lot of people have no faith in the police service to address these concerns with regards to catcalling and being touched without permission and stuff like that while walking down the streets. A lot of women in Trinidad and Tobago seem to have been victim to this at one point or another. What do you think has to happen for these persons for the faith in the police service to treat with issues like this to be rebuilt?
For me, I always believe in education. And the education must not just be the theoretical aspect. You must put that into action for it to become something successful and lived. And where law enforcement is concerned, and we're not just dealing with the police, we're dealing with the Coast Guard, with the Army, anybody in military, there needs to be a strategic development of a training package that would be able to be implemented in these institutions for recruits and also for senior officers. And that training should not just be a one-time training, it should be an ongoing process, like every 3 months, every 6 months, the officers are brought forward again to go through that process of retraining. The aspect of women not feeling empowered or free enough to go to law enforcement to report where somebody groped them or somebody catcalled them in the road shows the clear information to society that they have no faith in the police system to look at this as a serious issue once again because of victim blaming in society, once again because of how women are looked. Well, you know, and some officers would even say, well, the man didn't do you anything, he just gave you a compliment, he just say you have a nice shape, you know, he just say you're behind well rounded, you know, he didn't do you anything when you're coming in the station for that, and it have more serious things to discuss. So it's a overall training of everyone, not just police officers or the military, but from public officials, religious institutions, academia, across the board, education, and understanding the definitions, because sometimes the definitions confuses people. Sometimes somebody would say, but it's in domestic violence and gender-based violence, but where's the difference? You know, so doing some national awareness around the definitions of the terminologies that we use in society, we need to do that, especially for the man on the ground, so that they would not be confused. And when persons are confused, they're unable to make a proper decision. So we need to clarify.
Okay. So whether you call it misogynistic culture, rape culture, or you just want to categorize it as gender-based violence, how do we treat with this? How do we fix it? How do we stop it from happening?
We begin a discussion with everyone, because first of all, we need to set a mark in society that this discussion of gender is not a war between men and women. It's not a war between who is right and who is wrong and who is stronger and who is better. It's a discussion for equality, a discussion for acceptance, respect, a discussion to understand that these social and cultural norms which have negatively impacted our families and our communities need to stop. We need to recreate new systems and new cultures and new norms that will carry us into the future. So it starts with an open conversation for change and lead to action.
Okay, Amilcar, you raised a point earlier about government's role in eradicating the problem or the pervasiveness of rape culture. What do you think is the government's role in fixing this problem?
Right, I think the two major things we could look at right now, but three, their job is a legislative agenda to make more up-to-date the sexual harassment legislation, because it exists. But also they could create a climate that could mobilize the private sector, corporate life, schools, and how it affects education, and that's a live on public education. As soon as young women begin to go through puberty, they are victims of sexual harassment from primary school. So that is something we could really consider, how it affects education. So bringing sexual violence and how it is ingrained in the economy. Second, make sure they could do the tie between what happens in women's social experiences and the economy. Inequality between men and women also has an economic character because of sexual violence. It's also unproductive for the economy when women are victims of violence. It's a burden on the state in terms of healthcare, and it also denies them their dignity. And last, violence against women is a violation of women's human rights. And that's what we need to see. And the state should never promote a politics of self-responsibility, because it's not women's right to defend themselves against violent men.
Amilcar and Sherna, thanks again for coming in, and I really feel like we barely scratched the surface, but we'll continue the conversation.
Agreed. Thank you.